have done zero preparation for today's topic.
Me
I am
too.
guessing you have not done any preparation
I
either.
was planning on doing some prep this morning, but that got shot to hell.
Instead, you decided to throw up, I guess.
Yeah. My prep time, I laid in the dark with my eyes
Sounds way
closed.
more fun.
Hello, and welcome to Middleish, the podcast about moderation in all things. I am Michael Gray.
And I am Erin Green. Hello.
How's it going? Hi.
Very good.
hello.
I think I would venture a guess that it's going much better for me than it is for you this morning,
I'm great. I don't know what you're talking about.
just based on our conversation. Poor Michael has a little bit of a migraine that's on its way out, so that's good. But
It's leaving. It hasn't left, but it's packing its stuff up, and it's taken a while. It's like, come on, man, let's go.
it's like
Get
that
your stuff and
smelly
get out.
house guest that's a freeloader and is eating all of your yogurt and won't leave your house and leaves dirty laundry everywhere. And you're like, can you just move it along? Get out of here. Is
That
it kind of
felt
like that?
that felt very specific.
I have no idea who that might be, but
I mean, it was
Those
kind
house
of
guests
general at
exist.
first until it was like eats all your yogurt. I was like, okay, there's a story here.
or any other food. I don't know. I like
Right.
my yogurt, all right. I eat it every morning, and if I don't have it, I might get a little peeved.
It's a lot like that house guest that smells and eats all your yogurt, and you just want it to go away, but it doesn't happen soon enough. So
As somebody who has, I think I've experienced one migraine. I don't really know what constitutes a migraine, but I
I don't
had one
either.
really bad episode that I think probably would. And Matt gets migraines. So, as
Mhm.
somebody who has experienced one that was quite hellish and incapacitated me for the entire evening and lives with somebody who experiences them, I 100% feel for you. And
Yeah,
I'm very
they're not
sorry.
fun.
Yeah.
They're not a good time. So here was my week, right? Kathleen's mom has a business, and her business owns a townhome down in Galveston. And so we get some weeks every year, like right on the bay. It's like 4 minutes from the beach. It's awesome. And so we went down there on Monday afternoon and stayed. We were planning on coming back Thursday. We had it till Friday, but the girls had some stuff Thursday afternoon. And so Thursday morning, Kathleen was kind of like, she was like, why don't you stay? Like, why don't I take the girls? Why don't you stay and just have the day to yourself, have the night to yourself? You can come back Friday. I was like, okay, that sounds nice, you know? So that's what I did. So I stayed Thursday night for like this rest, right?
Bachelor night.
I wake up at 5 a.m. with just like my head is like, feels like it's
Oh,
splitting open.
Oh no.
And just like nauseous, and I can't go back to sleep. You know, like when like you have a really bad headache, sometimes if you can lay just right,
Yeah.
it's like you can get the throbbing to stop enough that you can maybe get back to sleep. Like, nah, it wasn't happening. So for like
Shoot.
2 hours, I'm just like trying to turn cautiously because every movement just aches. And then at about 7 o'clock, I'm like, oh no. And I like jump out of bed and just like throw up like over and over and over again. And yeah, and then I finally got back to sleep about 7:30, but I had to be back here for work in the morning. So like I'm driving an hour back on the freeway with just like, it's like, oh my God, my
You
head's
can
just,
hardly
like,
see,
pounding.
like you've
Yeah. So
it's like
So it
looking through a
was-
straw where
yeah, it was very nice of her to have me stay. And I got some work done yesterday and just had a nice, like relaxing evening, but it wasn't quite as restful as I was
Oh
hoping.
my goodness.
And so
Ugh.
that was my morning. Yeah.
Yikes. Well, thanks for being here. And
Yeah.
as listeners will find, this story is actually very pertinent to our topic today.
It really is. Yes. But real quick, I want to say and I want to ask you about your race before we get into the topic.
Oh.
But we had a great time down there. Like there's a country
Yeah.
club we get to go to with a pool right nearby, and we swam and we're in the ocean, and we went down to like Galveston has sort of this strip called the Strand, which like shops. So it's like a candy shop that we went to, and Girls had ice cream for lunch one day. It was great.
Perfect.
Yep. It was a lot
How
of
far
fun.
is Galveston from you?
About an hour, a little
Oh,
less.
that's easy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's super easy.
They
Yeah.
they have a 70.3 down there, a half Ironman that I always
Hmm.
considered doing, but I never did.
Yeah.
And I always heard good things about it in terms of just like the setting. And
Yeah.
so
It's not the prettiest beach,
yeah.
like it's kind of the waters, I think from what I've heard is the way like the Gulf of Mexico kind of churns, like it gets like the silt and stuff. So it's kind
Mm,
of
yeah.
brownish water, but it's not like dirty. It's the ocean. It's
Right.
awesome.
It's
It's
just sand
fun.
and silt.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. So we had a
Oh,
good time.
good. I'm glad you guys got to do that.
Yeah. And so you last weekend, as of recording, had your big gravel race, 200 mile,
Uh-huh.
right?
206.
200 and yeah, we absolutely need to count every mile because
We have to
it
count that
100% matters,
when,
right?
when I finished. So I finished after dark. It took me over 15 hours. And I know. So basically riding from sun up to, sundown. And I think we'll talk about this a little more in depth on a future episode. But
Yeah.
I finished. It's in the dark. I'm kind of hobbling with my bike. Matt's helping me walk with my stuff. And these two older gentlemen who are obviously locals to Emporia come up and they're like, "Did you just finish that race?" And I was like, "Yeah." And they said, "Did you ride the 200 miles?" And I said, 206. And the guy is like, "Oh my gosh." And he's just marveling about this. And I said, "Do you live here in Emporia?" "Yeah, I've got a farm here." And he's like, "We have the best gravel in the world." And he's just talking it up. And he's like, I just admire you guys coming and riding your bicycles on it. I just can't believe it. And blah, blah, blah. And so he introduces his friend who's in town visiting and observing this race, who came from California.
Hmm.
And his buddy's like, "So you raced." He's pointing at me, not Matt, pointing at him. He's like, "So you raced, not you?" And I was like, "Yeah, I did it." And he goes, "And you just finished 200 miles." And I said, 206.
206.
I'm like, because that extra 6 miles, I was getting text messages. I get text messages that pop up on my computer. And I was getting text messages from Orly, who owns the bike brand Blue that I ride. And he's like, "You're there, you're there." And he's cheering and congratulations and all this stuff because he's seeing my little dot and he sees that I'm at the 200-mile mark. And I'm
Oh,
like, actually, I've still got almost a half hour before I cross the finish line. So shut it down. Don't congratulate me yet. So yeah, that extra 6 miles, it makes a difference when you're riding gravel
heck yeah,
because
it
you're
does.
not going super fast.
Yeah. I mean, you have to make sure people know every single mile on that because that absolutely makes a difference.
Yeah. Yeah. 206.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah.
it was an adventure. We drove and saw what we hear is the most boring part of the United States to drive through, which is eastern Colorado and into western Kansas. But, it was an adventure. Like part of it was driving over there with our pickup and our camper, and
Mhm.
we saw some friends along the way, and it was good. Yeah.
Nice. Well, congratulations. You did it.
Thank you.
That's awesome.
I did it. And
Yeah.
I'll talk more about this in another episode, but
Yeah.
to be honest, just finishing that one was a huge victory because I really didn't think I could finish.
Yeah.
There were parts of the day where I truly was like, I'm
Mhm.
not going to make it today. Like this could be the real deal DNF where,
Yeah.
my body just can't do it. Like there's not really, the only other DNF that I've had was due to weather conditions where it was so cold that it was literally a danger, safety
Hmm.
issue for me to be out there.
Hmm.
This was like, I just don't think my body really can do this
Yeah.
anymore. Like I was the condition that was shutting it down. So yeah, I'm
Yikes.
very pleased to have crossed the finish line.
Yeah. Well,
And here I am.
for what it's worth, I'm proud of you for doing it.
Oh, thank you.
That's awesome.
And for once I'm sitting across, well, sort of virtually sitting across from somebody who looks a little more deathly than I have looked all week. So I don't know if that's a compliment, my friend, but
Aaron and I are having a contest of who feels worse today.
Yeah, you're making
We're
me
both
feel like
losing.
bright-eyed and bushy-tailed over here. I'm ready.
Oh
Let's
man.
do
Yeah.
this.
Well, that's awesome. Yeah. So I think very soon we're gonna record an episode just kind of talking through this experience that Aaron had, and even just kind of a little bit bigger scale about, these extreme races and the concept of Middleish within them. And yeah,
Mhm.
it's going to be good. I'm excited to do that.
Yeah.
Before we jump in, I would like to, for those
Uh-huh.
that are watching, I would like to show you my new mug. Can you see that?
That's what she said.
So it's a
Oh,
that's what
that's
she said mug.
clever.
Yeah. It says that's what in quotations and then dash she, like she said it,
Like
right?
it's
So
attributing the quote to
to she.
she.
Yeah. So this is,
She said it.
yeah, this randomly appeared at my door and I was like, what is this? And it was from our friend and client to both of us and listener, Leslie Walla,
Leslie. Yeah.
who is, yeah, a huge fan of The Office and just a huge fan of the podcast and just all around awesome person that we both have had the pleasure of working with. And so that was a nice little surprise, just that appeared at my doorstep.
That is a clever mug.
That's
Good
what she
find,
said, mug.
Leslie.
Yeah,
Good
yeah.
find.
So I'll be adding that to the rotation along with World's Coolest Dad and the
And
hubby
hubby.
mug. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
I
Because the
like it.
Care Bear mug had to be retired. Yeah. Did I tell you about that?
You broke it, didn't you?
Is that what happened?
Didn't it break? I thought you said it broke.
Maybe it did break. I'd been questioning using it because like the inside was like coming off big time. And I was like, I don't know if I should be
I don't
using
know
this
how many
anymore.
like chips of ceramic, whatever I'm
Yeah.
drinking when I.
Maybe it did finally break. And that's what, because I have been thinking about, okay, I've had this since I was like 5. I should probably stop using it.
I'm
But
sure
no,
you can find a
added to the
replacement.
rotation. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good one. I like it.
Yeah.
I like it.
So,
So today's topic
yeah.
is something we can both relate to, I think, this week, especially with your morning today and my recent race, is coping with setbacks.
Mm-hmm. Setbacks. Yeah. Oh, were you going to say something?
I was just thinking of the next thing to say. So why don't you go first?
Well, I think it's an interesting topic, I think, because I think there's two ways to look at it. And I think for a lot of people, I think the way we think about setbacks is sort of like failures, right? Or like something that went wrong that's causing my attempt at being healthier or whatever to come to a screeching halt, right? I think that's one way of looking at setbacks. And I think that's a very common way of looking at setbacks. I think another way of looking at setbacks that we've talked about some is something that's part of the process, right? Like not just something that we hope to avoid, but something that's absolutely going to happen. It's
Mm-hmm.
unavoidable. And not only is it unavoidable, it's an important part of the process a lot of times. Not all the time by any means. Some setbacks just suck and they're rough, and that's just the way it
Right.
is. But I think a lot of times setbacks are something we have to figure out how to get past to move on beyond that, you know? Because I'm sure it's the same for you, but I've talked with clients many times. I mean, tons of clients that have said, like, I always get to this point and this is what always happens.
Mm-hmm.
And I just can't get past it. And it's like, well, maybe that's because of how we're looking at that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe getting past that thing means sinking into that setback and wrapping yourself up in it. And what does this have to give to me? What do I need to glean from this? Because we can't get past those things until we get into the middle of them. And so I think just, I guess, to start, I think it's important to go into this conversation with the understanding there's two ways of looking at these things, two ways of looking at setbacks, and how we approach them and how we treat them really has a lot to do with how much they impact us negatively or positively and how we move forward.
Yeah. When you mentioned that a lot of clients will get to that point where they're like,
Mhm.
this is where I always fall apart. This is where the wheels come off. I've also noticed people anticipating that happening. Like they'll,
Mhm.
before they get to that point, like for example, going on vacation or traveling with the family, and they have nutrition goals, or they have been very consistent with working out or something. And they know that going on this trip or having this disruption is going to cause some problems. All of a
Right.
sudden, there's this like fight, flight, or freeze response that happens. And a lot of people will just avoid strategizing their way through it, and coming up with solutions. And they'll
Mhm.
just do what they've always done, which whatever habits or whatever, just, okay, I'm going to just give it a week. I'm on vacation. I'm just not going to do anything about it. And they just kind of avoid trying to find their way through it in a positive, consistent
Mhm.
way. Um, and then when they get through that on the other side, they come back to you or I, and they're completely frustrated with themselves. They feel like a failure. They feel like they didn't do anything right. I totally
Mhm.
screwed it up. So instead of like approaching that, like you're saying, just like get in the middle of it and allow yourself to feel and be, and
Mhm.
then find some strategies, arm yourself with things, which we'll talk about some ways that you can do that today.
Yeah.
But yeah, I see people that just get that anticipatory sort of deer in headlights. This
Mhm.
is coming. I don't know what to do. And I have to remind them, like, man, look at these other little hiccups that you've been through. So
Mhm.
sometimes the little setbacks that we all have, little setbacks every day, whether you recognize them or not,
Mhm.
those help you prepare for some of these bigger ones. You can use the same kinds of skills, the same kinds of problem solving, self talk, all of that stuff to deal with some of the bigger ones or the longer lasting ones.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's why it's so important, I think, to just recognize on a regular basis those successes and those victories, is because, I mean, if there's any kind of victory in our journey, right, then that implies that there was some sort of struggle or difficulty or challenge.
Mm-hmm.
And the more we can recognize those and acknowledge those, I mean, the smallest things, right, is that gives ourselves some proof of, you know
Mm-hmm.
what, I've got past some challenges, I've got past some hard things, I've pushed through some potential setbacks and moved forward. And while sure, smaller ones are probably easier to get through than bigger ones, it's still the same concept. If we can do smaller things on a regular basis, well, that's how we can do a little bit bigger things. And that's why I think, and maybe I'm jumping the gun here a little bit, but I think one of the best ways to kind of help ourselves know that we can persevere through setbacks is by acknowledging these little wins on a regular basis. Because the more we do that, the more belief we have in ourselves, that we can overcome some things. And I think that's where setbacks are really. I think a lot of times that's sort of the root of the oh, here it comes again, or the avoiding the setback is
Mm-hmm.
a lack of belief that we're able to get through them.
Right.
Right. And we're faced with it. And it's like, oh, I've tried this one before and it didn't go well.
Mm-hmm.
So I can't do it. Ignoring the fact that you're a different person now. And if you've been doing some work, with, whether it's mindset or strength training or on your diet or whatever, like you're a different person now. And so when you approach that same setback, it's not the same situation because you're not who
Yeah.
you were last time. But I think the more we can just begin to instill belief and trust in ourselves, um, with those little wins, the bigger ones are a little bit easier to face because we've got some proof.
And you're so right, because I remember learning somewhere along the way that experiential learning is the most powerful form for us. So we base our belief systems off of experiences over just about anything
I like
else,
that.
something we have personally experienced. So
Sure.
instead of reading or hearing from others or anecdotal evidence or any of that stuff, what we experience to be true. I mean, just look at the world around us in the past year and a half. You had people that were like, well, I don't know anybody who's died of COVID, so it must not
Mhm.
be real. Or nobody in my circle has said that blah, blah, blah. And so,
Yeah.
so we base it on kind of our own lived experience first and foremost. So what you're saying as, okay, let's acknowledge that our experiences are very powerful for us, and let's take our experiences and just reframe how we look at them,
Mhm.
and look at some of the small victories we've had along the way, and the
Mhm.
ways our strengths, like pick out. I had to do this when I was in school for dietetics, and I actually hated the process, but I'm really glad that I did it now, is like listing out your strengths. Like, what are some of your strengths that you can, you know, that you can say like
Mhm.
firmly, this is something I'm very good at doing. And what are some things you need to work on? What are some of your weaknesses and some of your,
Mhm.
blind spots and things? And that was, I hated going through that process, but it still serves me really well today to be like, I'm a problem solver. Like, I'm definitely that type of
Mhm.
personality. And whenever I'm confronted with a setback, and, I'm a pretty positive person, like I can always find some kind of silver lining or some way to talk my way through it.
Mhm.
So I will use those skills to get through any kind. It doesn't matter what, this is a new situation, a new experience that I've never lived before,
Mhm.
but I can rely on these skills. So just back to, piggybacking on your point, I think that's why it's so important to celebrate those little everyday wins and those small victories along the way, because then you can pull from those
Yeah.
experiences, and that experience will shape your belief in yourself and your trust that you can
Yeah.
overcome this, or you can work your way through it, or you can make a better decision that serves you. So that's something, a little more philosophical, but if
Mhm.
people dove into some of that within themselves, and, list out like some of why is this so hard for me to believe I can handle this? Well, your experience has been this.
Yeah.
So what kinds of skills do you have that can pull you through that you can
Right.
work on?
And that's a really, I'm really glad you said that, because that's a really good way to look at that. Because I think, the wins happen whether we acknowledge them or not.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And if we don't acknowledge them, they don't become part of our experience, even though they're happening. Right. They're
Good point.
there, but we
Yep.
don't experience them because we don't say, oh, we don't point them out. We don't acknowledge them.
Right.
So I'm really glad you said that, because that's a really important way to look at that, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so we might as well acknowledge them and pull them into our experience so that we can build that trust and belief in ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, that's a
Yeah.
whole new way
I
to
don't
look
think
at
I
that.
actually said that. I think you pulled that out of what I said.
Well, maybe, but like
You're
it's,
making me sound really brilliant, and I think it was more like you're
you know,
pulling it all together.
it's all building, right? It's all, yeah, on top of each other. But I really like that. I think that's really important, because those they're there. So if you want to look, I mean, something I do often with clients is, especially if
Mm-hmm.
they're really struggling with like with this kind of thing, or just feeling like everything's failure or whatever, is like, hey, you know what? Let's, at the end of the day, let's take some time, take 3 minutes. Okay, what went well today? What did you do that
Mm-hmm.
went well? To just begin to acknowledge that stuff, um, because they're there. Those things are there,
Yeah.
and if we don't acknowledge them, that doesn't mean they're not there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's just a really good way to look at all
So
this.
I think that you and I probably help clients do this through
Mhm.
our, just showing we can take an outside looking in to
Mhm.
people, because we are not emotionally attached to those decisions and those beliefs, right? We can look and listen and observe what's going on and point out these things for people. So, one example I'm thinking of is a client that I'm working with that has been doing a lot of work on her food relationship.
Mhm.
And it comes from this kind of restrictive mindset around food, where certain foods are treat foods. When I go on vacation or when I travel, I like trying all kinds of different foods, but it comes down to almost like I feel compelled to eat as much of these treat foods as I can while I'm on vacation, because when I'm home, that's off limits. Those are the foods I eat. So we did a lot of work, just day-to-day kind of work on dismantling that belief system that you have to completely indulge in these foods only once in a while and get out of that restrictive mindset and truly allow yourself to have those foods that, you know, presumably we've been told they're bad or you shouldn't eat them. But then also, just because there's a treat food available to you and you're on vacation or you're traveling or whatever, doesn't mean that you have to eat it.
Right.
Especially if you take a bite or you take a drink of something and you're like, this doesn't do it for me. It's okay for food to be disappointing. So
Mhm.
we worked through all of this, right? And we started working together during COVID, so there wasn't a lot of traveling going on, but she did have a couple just kind of short trips to see family. And I remember the first trip that she took, she was like, I'm just kind of wondering how this is going to go, because her
Mhm.
experience up until this point when she traveled away from home was really challenging in a lot of ways. And it was eating any kind of, fun food she could get her hands on, and just
Right.
eating things just because this is the only time I eat cake, or this is
Mhm.
the only time I get French fries or whatever. And we had a great discussion around pizza too, because she found that, like, man, there are a lot of pizzas that I used to eat all the time that actually don't really do anything for me. So the setback in this situation, presumably from the client's point of view, was the traveling. Okay, I've done all of this work on my food relationship, on my eating, on just healthful behaviors in general. And it's been in a very controlled, predictable environment at home. And now I'm traveling. And historically,
Yeah.
this has been a huge setback because
So
all of a
now there's
sudden
no
I'm thrust.
control.
Totally.
Yeah.
And there's and I'm careful with that word when I talk with clients, but it
Mhm.
is a real thing,
Yeah.
perceived control
Yeah.
over the situation and your surroundings.
Mhm.
So it really was like this setback, like, oh, I'm traveling, I'm going to lose ground, I'm going to gain weight, I'm going to eat all this stuff, whatever. And I had to remind her, like, hey, you've actually been practicing these skills like every day that we've
Mhm.
been working together for the past couple of months. You've got this. Like, you
Yeah.
know how to handle this. So
Yeah.
let's just practice the same kinds of it's the same kind of stuff you've been practicing and knowing and
Mhm.
learning about yourself. And lo and behold, I see these notes in our, log that she's like,
Mhm.
yeah, I tried a bite of this and it was really crap. And so I didn't eat it. We went out to a pizza place. It wasn't very good. So I did this. And she really just had this and then there were other times when she was like, oh my gosh, we experienced this authentic Mexican food where and she's describing like the smell of the fresh baked tortillas and just the cacophony of all the cooking and, banging around and different things and the music. Like, the whole experience was
Yeah.
amazing to her. And she had this wonderful, very mindful and present meal. So that's just one example of how this perception that this is going to be a setback and kind of that anticipation that I'm going to fail at this or
Mhm.
I'm going to totally lose ground, yet taking some of those skills that you know how to do and reminding yourself that you can do this. It may not
Mhm.
look perfect and you probably won't have full control over anything. We never do. We always think we
Right.
like to think we do.
Right.
But anyway, I mean, just like that was a very impactful experience for her. And ever since then, she's been like, oh, well, I can do this. It changed her experience.
Mhm.
So
Yeah. This is a bit off topic, but it's a
that's
rabbit
okay. We go
trail
off
from,
topic all the
yeah,
time.
from what you were saying. Isn't it so exciting when a client realizes that, oh, it's not the circumstances or the situation that gives me a feeling of control. It's
Mhm.
me, right? Like when they're at home and things are going well and then they're going to go somewhere, it's like, oh no, I'm going to be somewhere different. And it's like, that's okay because you're going there. Like you're taking
Yeah.
you with you.
Yeah.
And it's not like, sure, it is easier when there's a routine and that kind of stuff. That stuff provides an element of ease and comfort and predictability. Absolutely.
Hmm.
But you're the one doing the work and we've talked about this before, like, we try to like outsource success a lot of times. Like we put our success in the hands of something external and
Hmm.
that never works out and it's really never there. But when they realize like, oh, it's not my environment that is causing this success. It's me. And then
Mm-hmm.
I go with me wherever I go, and I can still employ and enact the same kind of disciplines and strategies or whatever, no matter where I am. It's such an exciting
Mm-hmm.
thing when they're like, oh, okay, like
Oh, here I
I'm the one
am.
doing
Yeah.
this. It's not because of, whatever in my house or my kitchen, or
Yeah.
it's me. And
Yeah.
you go with you wherever you go, which means you
Mm-hmm.
have those skills and all that. It's such an exciting thing. So anyway, kind of
Yeah.
off topic,
No,
but yeah.
that's a good point. And I enjoy seeing that in clients too. And it's something that I have to remind myself about as well. Like this is no different than, the time that blah blah blah
Mm-hmm.
happened or whatever. And so you can, and that's a big piece is self-talk
Mm-hmm.
when you're coping with a setback that might be, I mean, the first thing that comes to my mind is something that happens like in a race kind of situation or in an immediate kind of situation where you have to make a decision or you have to kind of be on your toes and pivot like right in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
That self-talk and just kind of keeping yourself calm so that you don't just fly off the rails with this emotional tailspin of like, this is all jacked up and I don't know how to do this and I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
lose it. Just level headed, deep breath,
Mm-hmm.
talk your way through it. Like
Yeah.
how would a friend or a spouse or a coach or, somebody who cares about you talk you through this? How would
Right.
you do that?
Right.
I think
And
that's important too.
I think it's incredibly important. And I think just kind of piggybacking on top of that is recognizing that we often give setbacks way more weight and value and power
Oh,
than they need.
totally.
Because guess what? You're going to screw a lot of stuff up. Like that's part of learning.
Yeah, and
Is
shit
is
happens.
yeah, doing things poorly for a while is how you do them not so poorly. And doing that for a while is how you start to do it kind of okay. Like that's part of stuff. Like I use this illustration a lot with clients. So I've been playing the guitar since I was like 15. So what's that? 10 years because I'm 20. I'll be 25 in September. Um, just kidding. I'm 40.
I
I'll be
was like,
41. You're like, what?
okay, my brain is tired, but I was doing the math real quick on that one. And I was like, wait a minute.
Yeah, I liked your face. It was like, wait, what?
Michael's trying to pull a fast one on me.
No, so
Damn.
whatever that is, 26 years, I don't know, a long time, 25 years. Um, and so I'm pretty good now, right? Like I can do most things and it's fine. I'm
Yeah.
not exceptional, but I'm real decent. And I sucked for a long time, a long time. And I'd get mad about it and pissed off and frustrated and, that kind of stuff. But at the same time, like every time I screwed something up or couldn't do something well, I learned how not to do it. And we
Mm-hmm.
really undervalue learning how not to do things. Like
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of times we only want to learn how to do it. We don't want to go through the process of the mistakes and the setbacks and screw ups and
Yeah.
that kind of stuff. But learning how not to do things is really valuable information
Yeah.
because then we apply that to the attempt the next time. Oh, this didn't work out. So let me avoid that
Mm-hmm.
and let me try a new way. And it can be really helpful when someone lays it out there for you. Absolutely. But it's also really helpful when you go through the process
The
on your own.
experience.
The
Yeah.
experience,
Experiential
because
learning.
then it's
Sure.
it's it's a it's a deeper kind of learning. I know the things to avoid as well, not just the thing to do. And when
Mm-hmm.
we know the things to avoid as well, then man, we've just got a whole, like, we can approach situations with a bigger arsenal of tools or tactics or strategies or whatever to really help ourselves be more successful. And then those things parlay into other situations that maybe aren't the same, but are similar. And you know what? This didn't work with that other thing. I bet that wouldn't work with this. So I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do
Yeah.
the things that have been successful. Right. And so learning how not to do things or going through the process of the setbacks, I just think it's so critical. And we put so much energy into avoiding those things, avoiding the hurdles,
Mm-hmm.
avoiding the challenges. I'm going to do something really kind of douchey here. I'm going to quote myself. So,
Oh.
okay.
Okay.
So
Douche
just,
away.
I will douche away here, but this is a post I put up the other day and it's perfect for this. It just says, we think that getting healthier means moving forward despite setbacks, right? Really, facing those setbacks is what moves us forward. We don't make progress by dodging struggle. We make progress by facing struggle. We need to get better at dodging, we don't need to get better at dodging. We need to get better at facing.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that, I know it's kind of lame to quote yourself, but
No, but that's a good point.
it just
I
really
mean,
fits with this topic, is
yeah.
that
And
go ahead.
people don't like to struggle. They don't, it's socially
Mm-hmm.
unacceptable in some ways.
Mm-hmm.
And people don't like to appear weak or,
It's uncomfortable.
again, feel like failures or feel like they
Mm-hmm.
don't know how to do something. So there's this, and I think that might be like a Western culture kind of thing too,
Sure.
where we, you know, are uncomfortable with
Mm-hmm.
setbacks and with things not going the way we plan or with looking foolish like we didn't know what we're doing. I think that's really important to
It's it's
point out
absolutely a
too.
part of our, like, the way we view things in like a societal way. And then on top of that, I think just the nutrition, fitness, diet industries, they paint a
Mm-hmm.
picture of ease, you know,
Yeah,
like
this is the way.
just take this supplement and it'll literally melt off your body. Just add butter to your coffee in the morning and you can eat whatever you want. I mean, it's just, there's so many messages out there that say this is easy. Like in 30 days, you'll be a different
Mm-hmm.
person,
Mm-hmm.
you know? And so I think a lot of times it's that societal thing of we don't like facing that. And then this industry thing of, oh, if I'm facing that, I'm doing something wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of times, anytime there's a pushback or setback or struggle or challenge, it's like, oh, no, no, no. That I'm going the
Right.
wrong way, obviously, because that
Right.
shouldn't be there if I'm doing it right. When in reality, it's like, no, that's probably supposed to be there. What you're doing wrong is not, like we talked about earlier, settling into it, pushing into it, see what it has to offer you. See if there's some lessons you need to learn and take from that so you can get through it next time, as opposed to just meeting it and going like, okay, well, I guess I turned back again.
Well, and can we just acknowledge that we're all human beings and we all have different levels of coping
Mhm.
and thresholds for what we can withstand or what we can't. And so people might um, decide to go a different route or move beyond or through something at a different pace than someone else.
Mhm.
I have a friend who listens to the podcast. His name, hi Dusty. He's going to listen to this one.
Hi, Dusty.
Who I really admire because he's the type of person that he's just like, okay, I want to learn about that. I'm really interested in it, and I'm going to be a student and I'm
Mhm.
going to learn about it. And he just kind of approaches it in a systematic kind of way where he did this with surfing and swimming and winemaking and a thousand other things, triathlon and racing cars. He doesn't necessarily, you know, put on a fake front like I know what I'm doing, but it's just this very intentional, purposeful, I want to learn about it and move through the motions and get to
Mhm.
where I know these things. And he'll research and he'll ask questions. Other people are not that systematic and can't just, you know, sort of keep their emotions separate from the process, which I'm sure Dusty has emotions that are involved in these things too, but he's not a robot. but but I think that some people like me, for example, I think that I would get a lot more emotionally intertwined with some of the process I have with
Same.
things like, triathlon or learning a very
Mhm.
specific skill or building my business and learning how to be a business owner. Those things, do get emotionally intertwined for me. And so I have to find different ways to cope with setbacks, and some
Mhm.
things that may not look like a setback to other people feel like a total setback to me. And I use that word feel intentionally because,
Right.
again, there's that emotional,
Right.
entanglement that happens.
Yeah.
So if you are listening to this and you happen to be a coach or a trainer or a dietitian or somebody who's a teacher who's working with other humans, just keep in mind that those setbacks that people encounter could look completely different
Mhm.
for all 10 people in the room. and
Right.
could happen at different intervals of the process.
Right.
So I think that's another thing, just, and we can all show ourselves grace with that process, like
Mm-hmm.
knowing that, man, have you ever seen a friend get something really easily and you're like, shit, I cannot do this to save my life.
Mm-hmm.
Like, why is it so easy for
Yep.
you? I think we've all had that experience.
Yeah.
For me, it's like Matt showing me how to do something on a mountain bike. And I'm like, oh, geez, like just go. Like, I'll figure this out, but I can't
Yeah.
watch you do it and, feel like I've, got two left feet.
Right. I think I have two thoughts on that. And I think a lot of times, I mean, like you said, like we're all human. Like we all excel at certain things and kind of suck at certain things. Like that's just the way it is, right? Like we all have strengths. And so there's a very good chance that sometimes when you see people maybe grabbing a hold of things easier, that's just a thing they do well. That doesn't mean that you don't have things you do well. It just might be different. And that's not a bad thing. That's okay. That's part of this. So just accept it. Like that's the
Mm-hmm.
only good option. Is just accept I'm going to be bad at some stuff, but I can get better at it. I'm going to be good at some things. Some things are going to come more easily for me. So I think there's an element of that. I also think there's an element of a lot of times when we see people grabbing a hold of things easier or quicker, it's because they've spent more time facing setbacks. Like,
Mm-hmm.
you know what I mean? Like when they encounter them, they have enough experience facing them that they know, like, okay, this doesn't have to send me back to the start. I don't have to throw my hands up and be like,
Right.
why does this always happen to me? It's like, okay, so I face it again tomorrow and I face it
Mm-hmm.
again the next day. And they have that experience, they have that trust, they have that belief in themselves, but they also just like have practical tools and
Mm-hmm.
resiliency to setbacks. They
Yeah.
realize like this isn't as big a deal as I used to think it was. Because
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, I'm really of the belief that like when it comes to being healthier, you can't screw it up. Like
No.
you really can't. Like you go on on just some like crazy weekend of eating whatever you want. Okay. So,
Yeah, you don't just stop there. Like, if your
like,
intention is to be healthier,
yeah, you can
move
just go
on.
back to doing what you were doing.
Yeah.
That's you really can.
Right. Or take the pieces that, I mean, there's always something that you can pull out of those experiences that went
Mhm.
well. And our
Yeah.
friend Brian Fretwell has um that saying when he wants, talking about starting these conversations with people, what went well?
Yeah.
Ask yourself, ask your friend, ask your family, what went well today?
Hmm.
And we often focus on the negative so hard
Yeah.
that we lose sight of these other areas that are actually helping us toward,
Mhm.
like the example of getting healthier. If
Yeah.
you have that intention, chances are there's other ways that you are helping your health. Maybe you got really good sleep, maybe you went for a walk with your family or something and you helped with your social emotional health and a
Hmm.
little bit of physical health, but you didn't get that run in that you wanted or
Right.
whatever, you didn't get to the gym. So it's kind of looking at what are these little, breadcrumbs of success along the way that
Hmm.
you can then pick out
Yeah.
and celebrate.
Yeah.
I'm
Absolutely.
thinking of when you said like some people just throw up their hands and they're like, ah, nothing's
Mhm.
working. We're watching the Great British Baking Show right now.
I
I
love
know
that
we're late
show.
to this. I know we're late to this party because it's been going on for years. It's so fun and
Isn't
we
it fun?
love it.
It's
We
so
have
great.
totally, it's
And what's great about
delightful.
it is like it's like a reality TV show and they aren't assholes to each other.
Yeah, it's
They're
the
like, "Hey,
drama
I'm
comes
done. Can I help you?" It's
totally.
like,
Hey, I've got extra
"What?
this. Hey,
No
try
one's
this. Put it.
stabbing each other in the back. What's
Yeah.
going on?"
They're like, hey, quick, put it in the freezer. Hey, I've got this. Can I help you? It's great. And the only drama comes really from the time constraints and working in
Mhm.
a tent when you're basically doing this science experiment. And this leads me to one of the episodes we watched last week or a couple weeks ago where they're dealing with ice cream. They have to make a baked Alaska.
Mhm.
And it just so happens the show is filmed in the UK and they're in a tent. And so
Outside.
that
Yeah.
just compounds everything. And it happened to be in the like heat of summer and they had one of the hottest days and they're dealing with ice cream. And they had to make, what is it, like a sponge base. And then they had to put the ice cream in like do. So there's like 3 or 4
Yeah.
components to making this baked Alaska. And this one guy just, I mean, everybody's stuff was melting and it was going to shit. And so they had to throw it in the freezer and they were doing all this stuff. It was very, very hectic and high pressure. And this one guy, his entire thing just was melting, like dripping off the tray. And he just lost it and took the whole thing and dumped it in the trash. And one of the hosts was like, no, don't do that. Like she was really trying to talk him out of it. And he just was like, he shut down.
Mhm.
So when you're
Is he the one that walked
describing,
off?
yeah, he left and
Okay.
was
Yeah.
just, he basically just, he did not find a way to cope with that
Mhm.
moment. Or I should say that was his way of coping, was just saying, I'm effing done. Like, I'm
Mhm.
done. How many of us can relate to that? I certainly can. I think any of our
Yeah.
listeners probably can. But then when it came time to judge, right? So that everybody brings up their trays and the judges, taste it and they talk about it and they look at it. And this guy didn't have anything to present. And the judge, Paul, who's known as kind of a hard ass, but he was
Mhm.
like, was there anything wrong with your sponge? And the guy goes, no. He goes, was there anything wrong with your meringue? And the guy goes, no. And he goes, were your ingredients there? Were your flavors right? And he's like, I think so. And he goes, you could have plopped that messy, melted thing and we could have at least tasted the sponge. We could have at least tasted the meringue. We could have at least, like, he starts listing all of these things that this contestant presumably did correct and
Mhm.
probably very well and could still have gotten marks on those things.
Yeah.
To me, it was like, and I mean, I know we're talking about baking, but if you watch the show, you'll get it. Like, this is
Yeah.
very high pressure. And and they really, I mean, these people, it's like an art form. They're
Mhm.
putting their entire selves into these projects, into these bakes.
Yeah.
So that's just an example of, if you throw your hands up and say, I'm done with this, I'm not even going to try anymore. It's too hard. I screwed it up. It's over. You could be missing out on an opportunity to at least work through it and salvage something in
Yeah.
this situation. What can you salvage? And
Mhm.
I have tons of stories of things that I salvaged during my pro career of racing that
I can imagine.
went
Yeah.
south. I mean, and I could easily be like, yeah, screw it, I'm done with this, I'm not doing it. Instead, I guess I'll just walk the half marathon in this crazy heat and humidity because I can't run, and take selfies with these kids that are cheering me on the side of the road. Like, I mean, I'll find a way
Yeah.
to salvage what there is and maybe pivot your expectations and how you move forward. So
Yeah. Absolutely.
anyway,
That's a great illustration. And it's a wonderful show. If you haven't watched it and you like
it's
baking at
so
all, check
good.
it out. It's just fun and positive, and I love to bake, and it's just fun. Like, oh, what is that? I'm constantly looking stuff up on
Yeah.
my phone. Like, what's that technique or what's that cake or,
Yeah. And
but
Brits just have like a fun kind of way of phrasing things, and
mhm.
just their
Yeah.
cheeky little
Yeah.
comments, and it's good. It's
How
good
I
stuff.
describe the show is it's really nice. Like, it's a really
Hmm.
nice show. It's just fun and feels good to
Yeah.
watch. But
Delightful.
it's a great illustration because, I mean, for starters, what that guy didn't recognize is everybody else in that tent is in the same situation.
Sure.
Like, it's not unique to him. It felt
Hmm.
unique to him because he was probably looking at what was going wrong with his, and was his worse than everyone else's. And whether it was or not, he probably felt that way. So he's comparing, which bad idea, always,
Mm.
right? But like, everyone is in a similar situation. It's not unique to you. And I feel like a lot of times people approach stuff feeling like these struggles are unique to them. And it's like, they're
Mhm.
not. This is, everybody's got to figure this out. Right. Like,
Mhm.
and maybe it looks differently. Maybe people have different like reasons things are difficult, but I mean, we all have our own reasons, like why we don't eat enough vegetables or why we overeat in the evenings, but
Right.
we're all dealing with similar things, right? Like, those are super common things to deal with. And so I think if he had looked around him and like, okay, this is hard for everyone, we're all in the
Mhm.
same boat, then maybe it's worth continuing to push forward and see what happens, you
Mhm.
know? And here's the thing is, so he throws his cake in the trash, right? Okay,
Mhm.
so this attempt that's done,
Yeah.
right? Like,
There's
he
no going
decided
back.
it's done. And
Mhm.
so when we do that, when we meet like these setbacks and we go, F it, right? Like, I'm not doing it. And we just quit. we wind up in a situation where we're either going to never make an attempt to be healthier again, or we're going to start from a place that is much further back than you are in that moment.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, like the easiest thing to do is just to pick up where you left off. It may feel like the hardest thing, but man, it's the easiest one because you have all this momentum of things you've been working on. You have all these like recent lessons and wins that you're carrying with you to push into that. If you quit, which is just so super common, if you quit and a year later you're like, okay, it's January 1st, I'm going to try again. It's like, man, you don't have any of that stuff, or you do, but they're kind of like distant memories of it. They're not things you've continued to practice and have grooved and strategies that are right there, readily available. You're starting way further back. And really the only good option, I tell clients this all the time when things go sideways, the only good option is just to get back to what you're doing. It's the only good one.
Right.
Because your options are throw your hands up and then you never try again, or you try again, but way further back than you are right in this moment.
Yeah. I tell people all the time, this isn't a starting and stopping process. This isn't like you stop and you start again and you turn it off and you turn it on. This is like a hiking trail or whatever that you're navigating, and there's, obstacles, and there's kind of misdirections, and there's some things, but you have to find your way through it, not just stopping and quitting.
Yeah.
So a lot of it is just seeing your way through this, and what's the next thing I can do that puts me back on that path, or that finds a new path. That's the other piece. Like if people have it in their mind that I'm going to, do this thing, this is the thing I'm going to do. I'm going to, I don't know, lose X number of pounds for this wedding or something like that, or I'm going to do this 30-day challenge or whatever. These are some of the things that people come to us with, like these goals they want to reach. And we're very much more on let's focus on the behaviors and the daily things and what will actually help you be a healthier and more go on a sustainable path. The thing with that, setting the 30-day challenge, or I'm going to lose this X number of weight, if you don't reach that goal, or if it's clear to you that you're not going to reach that goal, all of a sudden you're just like, okay, well, that's done. What, you just stop. Like, I'm not going to get there. So I just stop, instead of reevaluating and finding a new path, or reassessing maybe your expectations or your goal or your outcome, and being flexible in that way. Look for a way that you can say, that didn't work out, but I can still do this. I can still do this. Try using that language the next time you run into a setback. I can still do this.
Yeah.
What is that thing that you can still do? How can you salvage that situation? Yeah. I think that would change a lot of the belief systems that people have, especially in the food and nutrition world and the health world.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's that concept that we've talked about before. And maybe we did a whole episode on this, but just of those behaviors versus outcomes. Like when we're solely focused on an outcome and the only point of our behaviors is to make the outcome happen, then when the outcome doesn't happen like we think it should, or when we think it should, or how we think it should, the behaviors are meaningless.
Yeah.
Right. Like, why am I exercising and eating more vegetables and getting better sleep if X isn't happening? Versus, okay, even if X isn't happening the way I thought it would, eating more vegetables is something I want to do on a regular basis. Getting better sleep is something that's good for me. And these things have value in and of themselves, regardless of the outcomes. I'm worth taking care of, so it just goes back to that concept. I can't remember if we did an episode on it, but maybe we did, or maybe we didn't.
I think we did something along those lines.
But just the idea that, these experiences have value. We don't have to always line up everything we're doing and everything, good or bad, right? Like successes or setbacks, up to the outcome. And I think that's what we do. Like, how does this relate to the outcome? How does this relate to where I'm wanting to go? As opposed to, this is just what's happening right now. And so let's take what we can from it, good or bad, right? Let's strategize better, or plan better, or figure out like triggers that make things more likely that to happen that we don't want to happen, or push into those setbacks. Like these things have value in and of themselves. And if we're always lining them up with, but how does this relate to my outcome? I think none of them, good or bad, easy or hard, whatever, have any value at all. And so it all becomes meaningless real quick.
Right.
And then why am I going to push into the setback? Because the setback is just keeping me from getting to the thing faster.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. That
Yeah.
end goal, you kind of
Yeah.
lose sight of the process instead
Mhm.
of just, I mean, a lot of people will just focus on the outcome instead of the process.
Yeah. And the
But,
process is everything.
it's everything. It's everything.
Everything. You
Yeah.
don't, you don't, you don't like what, like, I don't know, level up by
You're right.
from the outcome. You level up from the process to get there.
Hmm.
That's how things change. That's how our lives change. That's how we become healthier people, is by doing the shit over and over and over consistently
Hmm.
that gets us there. The process
Yeah.
is everything. The outcome does not change anything. It's all the process. It's all the
Yeah.
journey.
And that goes back to that experience, that belief system that's built on your experience. If you take note of the process, which is the experience along the
Mhm.
way, all of the
Mhm.
little experiences you have, good or bad, if you take note of those things along the way, that is focusing on the process
Mhm.
versus having that long term, I just have to get to this,
Right.
goal. Goals are powerful. Goals are
Yep.
motivating. It's very good to have your eye on a desired outcome.
Mhm.
That's not a bad thing. We're not trashing on
Not
that,
at
but
all.
having that be your sole focus and your sole driver, and not the lessons learned along the way and the change that is happening. There's a line in a movie called Life as a House. Have you seen that movie,
I
Life as a
haven't.
House? It has Kevin Kline in it, and
Mm.
oh, it's so good. It's
Mm.
about this man who's an architect, and he gets a terminal diagnosis, and he decides to build his dream house on this, like, ocean view, and his family is in shambles, and there's all this drama, and there's humor in it too, so it's
Mm.
it's a very good movie. But he says something in that movie, and I'm going to botch this line, but it's something like, change can be so subtle and so constant that you don't know you've arrived until you've you've been changed so profoundly over a period of time. Like, it happens so just day by day, these small little increments, and so consistently over time that you don't realize it happened until it happens, and you're like, man, I'm different.
Yeah.
Similar kind of thing here. And I think sometimes it's good perspective to keep when you are encounter some kind of a setback. What will this look like on the other side of that? What will I, if I make this decision, or if I make this decision, what does that look like on the other side of this setback? How
Right.
will I feel about that decision? Kind of project forward a little bit and play out some scenarios. If, depending on what you've encountered, play that out and see how it feels, and see which one feels right to you.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like I can't remember what book it's from, but there's a Ernest Hemingway quote from one of his books. Someone has gone bankrupt, and a guy asked him, like, how'd you go bankrupt? And he says, gradually, then suddenly. And that's how it works, right? It's like these little things
Yeah.
that we don't take note of, that, that build up, good or bad, and then all of a sudden it's there. And
Mhm.
that's how this works with getting healthier. Is it's making the choice to, add some vegetables to dinner on a regular basis. It's making the choice to go for a walk. It's all these little things, gradual, 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 and all of a sudden it's like, oh, everything's
Here I
different.
am. Yeah.
Whoa. Like my life has changed drastically, and I'm a different
Mhm.
person because of all
Yeah.
these little subtle things that we seem that we view as sort of meaningless and almost boring. In fact, I had a conversation with a client just last night. She said, I was reading something on Facebook, and all these people were sharing all these exciting things they're doing with their health and da da da. And she was like, I just feel like what I'm doing is so boring. And I was like, good.
That's a good thing.
I'm
Yeah.
glad, because that means you're doing things consistently over and over, and rehearsing and practicing and repeating until they just become a part of who you are, and you just adopt them and they're just what you do. And
Yeah.
exciting things can look great, and sound great, and they're fun to talk about because
Well,
people go like, "Whoa, wow."
and refer back to our social media podcast where we
Hmm.
talk about how people curate their feeds and put all this like
Exactly.
shiny, wonderful things that are happening in their lives. Yeah.
Exactly. And so for me, it was like, if you feel like, not that she was bored with what we're doing, but she was like, it's just kind of mundane,
Yeah.
right? I
Yeah.
was like, that means you're doing things over and over and over. And
Yeah.
that's consistency. And that's how
Mhm.
things move forward, you know? Yeah. So anyway.
Yeah. Good. So I think the overarching themes of this, thank you listeners for allowing us
Mhm.
to just have this free flowing conversation and kind of brain dump on this, but my key takeaways are, you know, don't don't let a setback just stop you in your tracks. Find a way through it or around it or over it, or how can you still savage that? Don't throw away your ice cream cake. And
For a
I
few
will,
reasons.
for a few reasons, I would still eat a soggy ice cream cake. I have this little journal. Can you read that? It says,
Never a
never a
failure,
failure,
always a
always a
lesson.
lesson.
I like that.
So that would be probably the overarching theme of this. You know, those
Yeah.
setbacks are teaching you something. Look for
Mhm.
those experiences, and you know, I don't want to say that coin term, look, focus on the positive, but you know, having a positive perspective on things and looking at, you know, I can
Mhm.
still do this,
Mhm.
that can really help
Yeah.
with those setbacks.
And the only thing I would add to that as takeaways is just that recognize that setbacks and failures, whatever you want to call them, they're not things that we should try to work to avoid. They're things that are a critical part of the process.
Yeah.
So embrace them because
Mhm.
they're going to happen. And if they're going to happen, we may as well welcome them in as opposed to
Mhm.
fighting them. Welcome, see what they have to offer you, see what you have to learn, see what didn't go well before and how we can do it differently. They're an important part of the process. And if your only goal is to try to avoid them, I don't think you're going to get very far,
Right.
being honest. Uh,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Good stuff.
All right. You got a meaning in the mundane?
Oh man, I have a lot. I actually was just thinking before we got to recording which one I was going to share. Um, do you have one ready on the ready, or do you have
Yeah.
to think of yours?
No, no, I have one. It's kind of mundane. I mean, it's not something that happens all the time, but it's something we've done a lot. So at the townhome, the beach house, this weekend, one of our so Lila and Sophie and I, one of our favorite things to do is like when we're at the beach, is to go sit in the surf and where it comes up, I don't know, maybe like belly button height on me, right? So not
Mhm.
very deep. I don't know, 10 inches, a foot, something like that. And we just sit there and with our legs out in front of us and we let the waves come in
Oh,
and the ones that knock us over, right? And we fall backwards and we laugh and we get up. And in fact, Lila and I were talking about like, this is such an odd thing. Like it's so almost dumb. Like if we were to explain to somebody, like, you know what we love to do at the beach? Like it would sound really silly, but it's, we, we sat there for like 30 minutes every day we went to the beach doing this, maybe longer, because it's so much fun to us. It's this seemingly boring, silly thing. Like, it's really fun. Go sit in the water and have it knock you over and over
mhm.
and over and over. Do that for an hour. But it's something that we love to do. And so just sitting there, doing this kind of seemingly boring thing with one girl on each side of me, and we're just giggling and laughing, and some of them coming strong. There was one that knocked me clear, like I did a somersault backwards. I was like, holy cow. Like
Yeah, that
just
water can be strong.
doing this kind of silly thing together and just enjoying a silly thing, mostly because it's us together sharing this
Mhm.
experience, um, was just awesome. Yeah.
I love that.
So that's mine.
Yeah, those you know, low budget entertainment moments where
Hmm.
you're like, I don't need anything but just
Yeah.
sitting in this water and
Well, even like
digging
asking them,
around.
like, "Hey, you guys want to go sit in the surf and have it knock us over?" They're like, "Yeah." Like, you want to go to an amusement park? Yeah, let's go.
Super cool.
Yeah.
I like it.
How about you?
So mine, I'm going to share the one last night. Matt and I have always tried to do like a weekly date night. And obviously, over the last year and a half, that's looked a lot different because usually we'll go out to dinner and, or go out and have a drink or something. We'll do something that involves being out in downtown Boise. And last night was the first time that we have actually eaten in a restaurant in Boise in over a year and a half, like inside.
Yeah.
And it was, I mean, we still were like, okay, do we wear masks to our table? I mean, I know it's not required, but some establishments still request that you do it. And I mean, there was all of this like, how do we do this? Like, it's just so weird. And like, we're walking to the restaurant and I'm like, oh my gosh, we haven't done this in so long. And so it just felt, we went out for tacos. Like it wasn't like, that big of a deal. I mean, you should always celebrate going out for tacos, but we really were like, this is just, it's so nice. Like just to do this simple thing. Again, just like you're sharing this very simple thing that is kind of silly to be so excited about, but we really were. So
awesome. Yeah, I love it.
It was really good.
Yeah. It feels good to do things that like feel normal that we haven't done for a year or and over. Yeah. Yeah. It feels really good. Yeah.
I know.
Awesome.
So
love it.
Thank you everyone for listening.
Thank you. Thank you. We appreciate you guys always, listening, watching. We appreciate your support in that way, and also your support in those of you who share this with, your friends and family. The message that we're trying to spread out there of just moderation and the concept of Middleish. We appreciate you.
Okay. We'll look for you next week.
Thank you.